The Congress of Vienna was a pioneering set of informal meetings between leaders of European states that set the geopolitical stage for the next century. After the French Revolutionary Wars, Napoleonic Wars, and the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire, many border disputes remained, many of which were resolved at the Congress. The German states were reformed from nearly 300 to a more manageable 39, which became part of the loose German Confederation. This was dominated by Prussia and Austria, and too loose to accommodate the German nationalist ambitions harboured by many in the region. In 1848, a set of loosely coordinated protests spread across Germanic Europe, protesting to the autocratic rulers of the 39 states making up the German Confederation. Aims differed, from the middle class seeking political freedom and liberal state policies, to the working class simply seeking better living and working conditions. What united the protests were calls to unite the separated nations of Germany. The separation in aims ultimately led to the revolutions being defeated by the ruling aristocracy. In the aftermath of the 1848 revolution, the new constitution of Germany, which represented the essence of national liberalism, was without a crown. Despite the Frankfurt Parliament's request for Frederick William IV, he did not welcome the flattering proposal. However, this was not on the grounds that he did not support unification. The king was conservative, not liberal. He did not support the ideology of the revolution, from which this constitution was born. He was also not in favour of Little Germany, which was the creation of a German empire without Austria, and which became more likely with this constitution. Finally, he was also aware that Austria was anti-Little Germany, and so the situation would induce unnecessary tensions between the nations. Despite this setback, in 1858, as Frederick William IV was left incapacitated by a stroke, Prince William became regent. There was new hope for the Liberals. From the outset, he lived up to Liberal expectations, preserving the constitution and appointing moderately liberal men to positions of power. Liberals returned to their political activity. In 1862, as the Prussian Kaiser Wilhelm and his parliament were in deadlock over a budget agreement, the Kaiser, who had threatened abdication, was convinced to appoint Bismarck Prime Minister. Although reluctant to appoint someone who wanted full control over foreign affairs, Wilhelm was convinced at the advice of his Minister for War, Albrecht von Roon. Bismarck proved himself an adept statesman, readjusting the balance of power successfully in Europe over the next decades.
Several times Denmark attempted to exert control over Schleswig and Holstein, areas under its authority, and were met by Germanic nationalist sentiment. Eventually, Christian XI proclaimed that the Danish constitution was valid for Schleswig and Holstein. Prussia and Austria declared war on Denmark, who were easily defeated, leaving Schleswig and Holstein under Austria and Prussian control. This agreement was tactically handled by Prussia's Otto von Bismarck to ensure that Austria and Prussia, holding separate territories, would face increasing tensions. Bismarck knew that Prussia would likely win any conflict, leaving them with both Schleswig and Holstein. He was right. In 1866, the Austro-Prussian War was announced, and in mere 7 weeks the Prussians were victorious. Bismarck's military force can be highlighted by the Austrians' devastating defeat at Königgrätz. After this success, Prussia had gained enough territory, 22 states, to abandon the German Confederation and replace it with the Prussian-led North German Confederation in 1867. The new constitution gave Prussia and Bismarck huge authority. Bismarck then sought to bring the southern states into this national union. Bismarck cultivated a rift between France and Prussia, provoking France with the publication of private discussions known as the Ems Dispatch. France declared war 6 days later. In the meantime, Bismarck had managed to assure the neutrality of Russia, Italy and Britain, strengthening his position further. France was left vulnerable and nearly defenceless. The war left France short of $1 billion and without priceless territory. As Bismarck predicted, the southern states unified with Germany, regarding France as the aggressor. This led to the establishment of the German Empire in 1871.
Bismarck's oppressive approach weakened support from his allies, the National Liberals. Disagreement stemmed from rapid industrialisation, which led Bismarck to introduce tariffs in 1879, under pressure from big business. The growth of socialism also weakened Bismarck's position. He saw socialism as a threat to patriotic progress, which would lead to economic chaos. In 1878, anti-socialist laws were passed against the Social Democratic Party, including restrictions of the socialist press and the outlawing of trade unions. When the National Liberals disputed this policy, Bismarck renounced support of the National Liberals and turned to more conservative allies, such as the Centre Party. The unexpected coming to power of Emperor Wilhelm II tipped conditions out of Bismarck's favour. Bismarck underestimated Wilhelm's stubbornness. his anti-socialist campaign became too extreme for an emperor with sympathy for the nation's workers. In response, Bismarck tried to exercise tighter control over the administration, but instead received an ultimatum from Wilhelm. He had resigned by March 1890 on the grounds that he and Wilhelm had had a disagreement about foreign policy. Very undemocratic conditions ruled in the powerful German state of Prussia, which was run by a three-class franchise. This means that the vote of a rich man was worth 100 times more than the vote of a worker. In the following pre-war years, the discussion came up again, in the SPD, about whether it was the right time to start a campaign for a political strike.
In the German elections of 1912, the SPD secured 4,250,000 votes and became the largest party in the German parliament, the Reichstag. Although it was unable to form a government until the removal of the Kaiser and the establishment of a parliamentary constitution in the Revolution. After the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne on the 28th of June 1914, the tangling alliances of Europe unfolded, and by August, the UK, France and Russia were at war with Germany and the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires. That year, the German Socialist parties voted in favour of war credit. This was a surprising decision given their pre-war commitment to the keeping of peace.
During World War I, most of the National Liberals avidly supported the expansionist goals of the imperial government. Following the war, the party broke up. Its left wing merged with the left liberal progressives to form the German Democratic Party. Most of the moderate and conservative elements of the party formed the more conservative Liberal Germans People's Party. And the extreme wing of the National Liberals joined the Germans National People's Party.
The German Revolution began in 1918 when sailors at Kiel refused to obey orders and engage in battle with the British Navy. By November, the revolution had spread to all major cities and ports in Germany. The country was in chaos. The Kaiser had lost all his followers and fled. On the 11th of November 1918, Germany signed an armistice with the Allies and a new German government was set up.
In 1919, Friedrich Ebert, head of the Social Democratic Party, took over the Reichstag as they were the largest party and claimed to represent the people. Ebert declared a new German republic with an elected government. In August, the Weimar Republic published their constitution, which immediately became one of the most advanced democracies in Europe. After repeated default on reparation payments, French and Belgian troops, against the will of a sympathetic Britain, occupied the industrial Ruhr region of Germany to requisition material. The people of the region resisted passively, refusing to work, while the German government continued to pay their wages. Faced with this increasing financial burden, the government merely printed more money, resulting in spiralling inflation, destroying savings, and making salaries paid monthly quickly worthless. The Great Depression, starting with the financial crisis in the USA, hit Germany particularly badly. Publicly, Germany had relied on loans through the Dawes and Young plans to maintain their reparation debt. Privately, the recovery of German industry had relied on American finance. As struggling banks recalled loans, the German economy struggled to repay and collapsed, leaving the population suffering. By 1932, Germany was experiencing unemployment rates of 40%.
In the July election of 1932, the Nazis for the first time became the largest party in the Reichstag. They had grown in strength since the failed putsch of 1923, using intimidation through the SA as a principal tactic. November saw the last democratic elections in Germany before World War II, with the Nazis remaining the largest party, although significantly losing support. Having resisted for a long time, seeing no other option, Hindenburg finally appointed Hitler Chancellor. In 1933, the Reichstag was burned down, reportedly by a Dutch communist, but many believe deliberately by members of the Nazi Party. Adolf Hitler used this opportunity to pass the Enabling Act, granting him virtually unlimited legislative power. 1934 saw the death of President Hindenburg, and Hitler then used the Enabling Act to make himself both president and chancellor, a role he titled Führer. In 1938, Hitler agreed with Neville Chamberlain of Great Britain not to invade Czechoslovakia in return for annexing the Sudetenland, a German-speaking region of Czechoslovakia. Germany promptly ignored this and invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia in 1939. Aggression continued, prompting British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain to affirm that the UK would intervene if Poland was invaded. On September the 1st, Germany invaded Poland. The next day, a joint UK-France ultimatum was issued for Germany to end its invasion of Poland. On the 3rd of September, the ultimatum deadline was reached, and war was declared. Years of hostilities followed, including the most inconceivable atrocities of the Holocaust. With Allied forces nearing Berlin, Adolf Hitler committed suicide on the 30th of April. His chosen successor, Joseph Goebbels, committed suicide the next day. Germany quickly surrendered, and on May the 8th, a ceasefire came into effect. The Third Reich had fallen.